Today we're diving into a really powerful idea from a sermon by Apostle Joshua Selman. What if you could gain dominion over time itself? Actually command it to help you fulfill your destiny. It's a huge concept, so let's unpack what that really means.
We've all been there, right? That nagging feeling that the clock is just ticking way too fast and you're falling behind in your own life. Well, according to this teaching, that's not just a feeling. It's actually the main obstacle we need to overcome.
So, let's get into Section 1, Destined for Excellence. The whole journey really starts with this one foundational belief, that every single one of us is designed for a life that's significant and successful. Now, this isn't just some motivational poster quote. The sermon presents this as a core spiritual truth, this idea that you are literally born for excellence. That's the blueprint. It's the divine starting point for everything else that follows.
And that leads us to the big question, doesn't it? If we're all designed for this amazing life of excellence, why is there so often a huge gap between that plan and our actual reality? This is where the sermon really pivots to identify the core problem.
Which brings us to Section 2, the problem of wasted time. The sermon argues that the main thing holding us back isn't a lack of talent or potential or even hard work. The great enemy in our story is the loss of time.
And the sermon gives a very precise definition for this. Delay isn't just about having to wait for something. It's a critical misalignment. It's a state where time has moved on, but your achievements, your progress, they just haven't kept up.
Okay, so if delay is the problem, what's the solution? This brings us to Section 3, Gaining Dominion over Time. And this is where we get into a really mind-bending concept. The idea that you can actually gain authority over time itself and make it serve your destiny instead of fighting against it.
So how does this dominion work? Well, it happens in two really powerful ways. First, there's what's called restoration. This is about reclaiming lost opportunities from your past and literally pulling them into your present. And then there's speed. This is about accelerating your future, accomplishing in, say, 1 year what would normally take 10.
All right, so how do we actually do this? How does it work in practice? Section 4 breaks it all down with the 4 keys to speed. And these aren't just abstract ideas. The sermon presents them as practical, spiritual systems you can actually use to unlock this kind of acceleration in your life. Here they are: wisdom, favor, prayer, and the prophetic. These are the 4 systems of advantage that the sermon outlines. Think of each one as a key that unlocks a different aspect of this spiritual acceleration. So let's take a look at how each one works, starting with wisdom.
Key number 1 is wisdom, and the sermon uses the parable of the 10 virgins to explain this beautifully. You remember the story. The wise ones brought extra oil, just in case. They were preparing for a delay they couldn't even predict. In this context, wisdom is that foresight. It's the ability to act today to prevent wasting time tomorrow.
Next up is the second key, favor. Now, this is so much more than just being popular or well-liked. The sermon defines it as a spiritual force that actually compels other people to help you, to open doors that should be shut, and to just supernaturally speed up your path.
So what does this favor look like in real life? The sermon gives us 3 really clear signs to watch for. First, you receive unusual kindness that you didn't necessarily earn. Second, you gain unusual access to people and places. And third, you find unusual acceptance where you'd normally expect rejection.
This little phrase from the story of Esther is the perfect example. Because she had favor, things happened for her speedily. That's the whole point right there. Favor doesn't just open doors, it opens them now.
The third key is prayer. But we're not talking about passive wishing here. The sermon describes this as active, strategic spiritual work. It's a tool you use to confront and remove all those unseen obstacles that cause delay and stagnation in the first place.
And that brings us to the final key, the prophetic. In this framework, this is all about using spoken declarations, words that are aligned with your divine destiny, to literally chart a faster course for yourself, helping you avoid all the wrong turns and dead ends that can waste years of your life.
Okay, Section 5, a life accelerated. So what happens when you start combining all 4 of these keys? Well, you get a life that operates on a completely different timeline, one that isn't limited by the normal linear ticking of a clock.
This question from the book of Genesis is what people ask when they see this kind of life in action. The progress is just so fast that it defies any normal explanation. People will literally look at you and ask, "How did you do that so quickly?"
The sermon uses this brilliant metaphor to explain it.
You can travel between two cities by car, right? Stuck in traffic, following winding roads. Or you can just take an airplane. It's the same destination, but a radically different timeline. These 4 spiritual keys are what upgrade your vehicle from the car to the plane.
And so ultimately, the sermon leaves us with this incredible challenge: to stop seeing time as our limitation and start seeing it as a resource that we can actually learn to command. It's a total shift in perspective. And it leaves us with one final, really powerful question: what could your life look like if you weren't limited by time?